A veteran and his dog helped a nun fix a church. What they found shocked everyone. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now let's begin. It was a cold, crisp morning in late autumn when Grant Mercer and his loyal German shepherd, Scout, entered the small town of Pineview. Grant, a man worn by years of service and struggle, walked with a steady pace down the deserted main street, his boots crunching on the thin layer of frost that had settled on the ground overnight. Pineview had always been a quiet place, one that seemed to be trapped in time, its narrow roads lined with old wooden houses, their paint peeling from years of neglect. The town was small, tucked between rolling hills and dense forests, where the only real landmark was the old church sitting at the end of the road. The church had seen better days. Its once vibrant stained glass windows were now cracked and covered in grime, and the steeple had begun to lean precariously to one side. The door creaked open as they approached, and inside, the smell of old wood and dust filled the air. It was clear no one had been here for some time. But there was a figure in the back of the church, an elderly nun, her white habit stained with age, standing at the altar with a look of quiet determination on her face. She was attempting to fix the broken pews, her hands shaking as she tried to lift a heavy plank of wood. Scout's ears perked up as he noticed her struggle. The dog let out a low whine, and Grant turned to see what had caught his attention. The nun looked up at them, her tired eyes meeting Grant's. "I could use some help," she said softly, her voice trembling with the weight of exhaustion. Grant walked toward her, offering a hand. "What happened?" he asked. "The storm a few months ago, it damaged the church," she replied, her voice breaking. "The roof is leaking, the pews are falling apart. But I can't do it alone." Grant looked around at the broken church and felt a deep sense of empathy. He could see the years of service the nun had put into this place, and he could tell she wasn't one to ask for help. But something in her eyes told him that she had no choice now. Without hesitation, he nodded. "We'll help you fix it," he said. And so, Grant and Scout stayed in Pineview. Over the following days, they worked alongside the nun, repairing what they could. But as they worked, they began to notice something strange. Every time they fixed a part of the church, there was an odd sensation in the air, a feeling of energy, as if the very walls were alive. It was Scout who first noticed it. The dog would often stand still, his ears twitching, staring at a particular spot in the church, as if something, or someone, was watching them. Grant laughed it off at first, thinking it was just his dog's overactive instincts. But soon, even he couldn't ignore the strange occurrences. A chill would sweep through the air for no reason, and the sound of soft whispers seemed to echo in the distance. One night, as they were finishing up some repairs, Grant stayed behind after the nun had gone to bed. He sat in the pews, running his hand over the cold, rough wood, wondering what had happened to this once beautiful place. That's when he noticed it, a small, hidden door in the back corner of the church that he had never seen before. The door was old, its wood warped and cracked, but it had an aura of mystery about it. As Grant approached, Scout growled low, his body tense. The dog's behavior only heightened Grant's curiosity. He reached for the door handle, and with a creak, the door slowly opened, revealing a dark, narrow staircase leading down into the unknown. The air grew colder as he descended, and the sound of his footsteps echoed in the silence. What could they possibly find beneath the church? The stairs creaked beneath Grant's boots as he descended further into the dark, narrow passage. Scout trotted close behind, his ears flicking at every sound, his body tense with alertness. The air grew colder as they went deeper, the stale, damp scent of old wood and stone filling Grant's nostrils. He could barely make out the shape of the walls, but the faintest glimmer of light from the flashlight in his hand revealed a stone corridor leading to a large wooden door at the end. The strange sensation in the air seemed to grow stronger the closer they got to it. It was as if something, or someone, was waiting behind that door. Scout's growls became more pronounced, his hackles raised. Grant paused, his heart thudding in his chest. This was no ordinary church. The deeper they ventured, the more it felt as though they had crossed into another world. With one last glance at his faithful dog, Grant reached out for the door handle. It was cold to the touch, and with a deep groan, the door swung open, revealing a hidden room, one that had been sealed off for who knew how long. The room was vast, with high ceilings and shelves filled with old, dusty books and artifacts. The air was thick with dust, and the smell of age and neglect hung heavy in the space. As Grant stepped into the room, he felt an overwhelming sense of history, as if he had stumbled upon something ancient. It was a sanctuary, but not one for prayer. This was a place of secrets. The walls were lined with shelves filled with old tomes, some so worn that the text had faded with time. The flickering light from Grant's flashlight caught on something at the far end of the room. A large wooden chest, intricate carvings of vines and symbols covering its surface, sat quietly in the corner. Grant's breath caught in his throat. It felt like the chest was calling to him. He approached it slowly, his mind racing with questions. What was inside? And why was it hidden in this forgotten room beneath the church? As he knelt down and touched the chest, Scout let out a sharp bark, his nose pressed against the wood, his tail wagging in a mix of excitement and nervousness. Grant hesitated for a moment, then slowly opened the chest. The lid creaked loudly, and as it opened, the faint scent of old paper and leather filled the air. Inside, there was a collection of strange objects, old scrolls, a set of keys, and what appeared to be an ornate, gilded box. But it wasn't the items. That caught Grant's attention. It was a small, dusty book resting on top of the pile. The cover was made of worn leather, and the title, barely visible from age, read, The Lost Secrets of Pineview. Grant's hands trembled as he picked it up, feeling a strange energy course through him. The book seemed to hum with an unseen force. He opened the cover, and the pages were filled with strange symbols and handwritten notes. There were illustrations of the church, the surrounding town, and strange markings that Grant didn't understand. But as his eyes scanned the pages, a name caught his attention. Sister Catherine, the very nun who had asked for his help. The book was filled with references to her, and it seemed to suggest that she had known something about the church's hidden history. Grant turned the pages eagerly, his mind racing. There were mentions of a hidden treasure, a secret that had been passed down through generations of nuns who had served at the church. But what was the treasure? And why had it been kept hidden for so long? Just as he was about to dive deeper into the book, a sudden noise broke the silence. It was the sound of footsteps echoing down the stone corridor. Grant quickly closed the book and glanced at Scout. The dog's ears perked up, and he growled low, his eyes fixed on the door. Someone else was here. Someone who didn't want them to find what they had uncovered. Grant grabbed the book and the chest, quickly hiding them behind a pile of old books on the shelf. He motioned for Scout to stay quiet as he listened, his heart pounding in his chest. The footsteps grew louder, and a shadow passed by the crack in the door. Grant held his breath, waiting. Who could it be? And what were they willing to do to keep the church's secrets buried? Grant waited in the shadows, his breath held tight in his chest as the footsteps approached. The dim light from the flashlight barely illuminated the stone walls, casting long, eerie shadows that seemed to dance with the creeping silence. Scout, ever watchful, sat rigidly beside him, his amber eyes fixed on the door. The sound of footsteps grew louder, closer now, echoing down the narrow corridor. Whoever it was, they were coming straight toward the hidden room. Grant's mind raced. He had to think fast. He glanced down at the book, still tucked safely in his hands, and felt a sense of urgency. Whoever was outside that door was here for the same reason, secrets. With a quiet nod to Scout, Grant silently moved to the back of the room, stepping carefully over the piles of old books and forgotten relics. The door creaked open, just a sliver, and Grant could see the shadow of a figure pass by. The figure paused outside the door, and for a moment, everything stood still. Then, without warning, the door burst open. Standing in the doorway was Sister Catherine, her face pale, eyes wide with fear. She quickly closed the door behind her, as if ensuring no one had followed her. Grant felt a sudden wave of relief, but it was quickly replaced by confusion. "What are you doing here?" Grant whispered urgently, his voice barely audible. Sister Catherine glanced at Scout, then at the hidden chest Grant had stashed behind the books. Her expression softened, but there was a flicker of something else in her eyes. Fear, perhaps. "You shouldn't be here," she said. her voice trembling. You don't understand. Grant took a step forward. I think I understand more than you realize. This church, this room, it's been hidden for a reason. What's in the chest, sister? What's in that book? The nun hesitated, glancing nervously at the door. She pulled Grant aside, out of the line of sight from the doorway. I've spent my life protecting this secret, she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. The church, it's not just a place of worship. It's a place of power. The treasure, the knowledge hidden here, it can change everything. But it's dangerous. Too dangerous for anyone to know about. Grant's mind spun. This wasn't just about a lost treasure or an old book. It was something much bigger, something that had been hidden for generations. What do you mean by power? Grant asked, his voice low. Sister Catherine swallowed hard, looking away for a moment as if she were searching for the right words. The church was built on a sacred ground, Grant, she said quietly. Long ago, it was a place where people came to seek refuge, but also to unlock something ancient. The treasure, it's not gold or jewels. It's knowledge that was hidden away by the early priests. The book you found, it's the key, but it's also a curse. It's been passed down for centuries, from one sister to the next, and each one has vowed to protect it, to ensure that no one ever discovers what lies beneath this church. Grant felt a chill run down his spine. The air in the room seemed to grow heavier, thicker with the weight of the nun's words. So, what's in the chest? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Sister Catherine shook her head. You don't want to know? She replied, her eyes dark with regret. Trust me, I've seen the consequences of uncovering what's been buried here. People change. They become obsessed, driven by something they can't control. The knowledge, it's too powerful. It will consume you. Grant stared at her, disbelief filling his mind. This was no longer just a story about a simple church renovation. It was a mystery steeped in centuries of secrets, a secret that had torn through generations. And now, he was tangled in it. So what do we do now? Grant asked, his voice steady despite the storm brewing in his chest. Sister Catherine's face softened, and for the first time, she seemed truly afraid. We leave. We forget what we've seen here. It's the only way to protect you, to protect everyone. If we leave the book and the chest alone, it will be as if nothing ever happened. Grant's hand tightened around the book he had hidden in his jacket. He had a choice to make. He could walk away, forget everything he had uncovered. Or he could find out the truth, the whole truth, no matter the cost. Before he could say another word, Scout barked sharply, his attention fixed on the door. Sister Catherine stiffened, her eyes wide with fear. Someone else is here, she said, panic creeping into her voice. They know we found it. We have to go now. Grant's heart raced as he grabbed the chest and shoved it behind the books, then motioned for Sister Catherine to follow him. As they moved toward the exit, the sound of footsteps outside grew louder, and this time, they weren't just passing by. They were coming for them. Grant and Sister Catherine hurried through the dim corridors of the church, their footsteps echoing in the cold silence. Scout trotted closely behind them, his nose twitching with every strange sound. The feeling of unease grew stronger with each step. Whoever was outside that door was getting closer, and they had no time to waste. Grant's heart raced as they approached the back entrance of the church, the sound of their hurried footsteps drowned by the low rumble of the storm outside. We can't go back that way, Sister Catherine said in a whisper, glancing nervously over her shoulder. The main entrance is blocked. They'll be waiting for us. Grant nodded, his eyes scanning the room for any possible escape route. They couldn't afford to be caught, not with what they had uncovered. His gaze fell on an old wooden door at the back of the church, hidden behind a stack of crates. What's through there? He asked, his voice low. Sister Catherine hesitated, then nodded grimly. That leads to the old crypt. It's a way out, but it's dangerous. Grant didn't hesitate. He grabbed the handle of the door, pushing it open with a creak. The air inside was stale, the scent of earth and decay heavy in the air. As they stepped inside, the dim glow from their flashlights revealed the narrow passage leading downward. The stairs were steep, and the walls were lined with centuries-old stone. How far does this go? Grant asked, his voice barely a whisper. Far enough, Sister Catherine replied, her tone heavy with a mix of fear and regret. It's the only way we can make it out without being seen. They descended into the darkness, the sound of their footsteps the only noise breaking the silence. The crypt was vast, its walls lined with the remains of long-forgotten townspeople, their names faded on the old stone plaques. Grant couldn't help but feel a chill as they passed the crypts, wondering how many secrets were buried in this place. As they reached the bottom, they entered a small chamber with an old wooden door at the far side. Sister Catherine moved quickly toward the door, her hand shaking as she reached for the rusty handle. "What is this place?" Grant asked, his curiosity growing. "This is where the knowledge is kept," Sister Catherine said, her voice filled with awe and fear. "The treasure, the book, it's all connected to this place. This crypt was built to protect it, but over time, it has become a prison." Grant's eyes narrowed. A prison for what? Sister Catherine turned to him, her face pale in the dim light. "The truth," she whispered. "The truth that has been kept hidden for generations. The knowledge contained in the book is more than just a story. It's a key to something far greater, something that could change everything we know." She hesitated for a moment before continuing. "But it comes with a cost. Whoever unlocks the secrets of the book risks losing themselves. It's happened before." Grant felt a knot form in his stomach. "What do you mean?" "The power of the knowledge is too great," she said softly. "Those who sought it out in the past were consumed by it. It drove them mad, twisted their souls. The book was meant to be locked away, to keep it from falling into the wrong hands." Grant turned to the door, his hand tightening around the flashlight. "And what happens if someone finds it now?" Sister Catherine's eyes were filled with sorrow. "We don't know," she whispered. "But I fear it's too late. The book is already in your hands." Before Grant could respond, they heard a sound from above, heavy footsteps, followed by muffled voices. Sister Catherine's face paled, and she grabbed Grant's arm, pulling him toward the door. "They're coming," she said urgently. "We have to get out of here now." Grant's heart raced as they pushed through the door and into the narrow passageway beyond. He could hear the voices growing louder, but he didn't dare turn back. They had no time to waste. With Scout leading the way, they ran down the corridor, their footsteps quick and determined. As they rounded a corner, Grant caught a glimpse of something in the shadows, a figure, moving swiftly toward them. "Hurry," Sister Catherine urged, her voice strained with fear. They ran faster, but the figure was closing in. Grant glanced over his shoulder, his breath quickening. The figure was getting closer. "We're almost there," he said, his voice tight. But just as they reached the end of the corridor, the figure stepped into the light. It was a man, tall and imposing, his face shadowed beneath a wide-brimmed hat. "You can't leave," he said, his voice low and menacing. Grant's heart sank. They were trapped. Grant stopped dead in his tracks, his eyes locked on the man standing before them. The figure was tall, his features obscured by the shadows of his wide-brimmed hat, but there was no mistaking the power that emanated from him. The man's presence was almost suffocating, as if the very air in the crypt had thickened. Behind him, the faint sound of more footsteps echoed down the corridor. There was no way out. Sister Catherine's hand trembled in Grant's as she took a step forward, her voice barely above a whisper. "We can't let him stop us," she said, her eyes flicking toward the end of the corridor where a faint light shone through the cracks in the stone. "We have to move." But the man didn't budge. He stood in their path, as immovable as the walls around them. "You think you can escape?" he asked, his voice low and cold. "You think you can just walk away from this?" Grant's heart raced as he glanced over his shoulder, making sure that Scout was ready. The dog was tense, his eyes narrowed as he studied the figure in front of them. Grant's instincts screamed at him to fight, but something in the man's gaze told him that wasn't the right option. "Who are you?" Grant demanded, his voice steady despite the fear swirling inside him. The man didn't answer right away. Instead, he tilted his head slightly, studying Grant as if he were a mere curiosity. "It doesn't matter who I am," the man finally said. "What matters is that you have no idea what you've uncovered." Grant's grip tightened around the small book hidden in his jacket. He knew the man was referring to it, the mysterious book that had led them to this moment. The man stepped forward slowly, his boots scraping against the stone floor, echoing in the cold, silent crypt. "You think this is about treasure?" he continued, his voice almost mocking. "You think the book is just a key to gold or jewels? No, it's far more than that." The man's eyes glinted in the dim light as he took another step toward them. "You're standing on the edge of something far greater than you can imagine, and I'm here to make sure it stays buried." Grant's pulse quickened. "What are you talking about?" he asked, his voice sharper now. The man smiled, but it wasn't a friendly smile. "I've spent years protecting this place, ensuring that the truth never sees the light of day. The knowledge you've uncovered, it doesn't belong to you. It doesn't belong to anyone." Sister Catherine stepped forward, her expression fierce now. "It belongs to the people," she said, her voice steady despite the fear in her eyes. "It's been kept hidden for too long. The world deserves to know the truth." The man's expression darkened, and for a moment, it felt as though the very temperature of the crypt had dropped. "You don't understand," he said slowly, his voice cold. "The truth doesn't set you free. It destroys you. I've seen it happen before, and I will not let it happen again." Grant glanced at Sister Catherine, his mind racing. The man's words were unsettling, but he couldn't let fear control him. They had come this far, and they couldn't back down now. "We're not leaving," Grant said firmly, his voice carrying an edge of finality. "We've come to uncover the truth, and nothing you say will change that." The man's gaze shifted to Scout, who was now growling low, his body tense. The dog could sense the danger, and his instincts were on high alert. The man raised an eyebrow, as if considering Grant's words. Then, without warning, he moved. It was so fast that Grant barely had time to react. The man lunged forward, grabbing Sister Catherine's arm with a vice-like grip, and before Grant could stop him, the man slammed her into the stone wall. Grant reacted instinctively, rushing toward them, but the man was already a step ahead. He pulled a small, gleaming object from his belt and pressed it against Sister Catherine's neck. Grant froze. The man's expression was unreadable as he held the object steady, the sharp edge of a knife just inches from the nun's throat. "I warned you," the man said quietly. "Now you'll understand why some secrets are meant to stay buried." Grant's heart pounded in his chest as he stood frozen in place, the weight of the situation bearing down on him. He had to think fast. He couldn't let this man get away with whatever dark plan he had in mind. In that moment, Grant realized the truth. The man wasn't just trying to stop them from uncovering the church's secrets. He was protecting something far darker, something that had the power to destroy everything they held dear. And if Grant didn't act now, they would all be lost. "Let her go," Grant said, his voice low but unwavering. "Whatever you think you're protecting, it's not worth this." The man didn't respond at first. He simply tightened his grip on Sister Catherine's arm, the knife still pressed dangerously close to her throat. But then, something in Grant shifted. He wasn't afraid anymore. He had come this far, and he wouldn't let this man, or anyone, stand in the way of the truth. Grant took a step forward, his eyes locked on the man's. "You want the truth?" he asked, his voice cold. "Then let's see what happens when we find it." Grant's heart pounded in his chest as he faced the man, still holding Sister Catherine with a cold, calculating grip. The knife pressed dangerously close to her throat, and every muscle in Grant's body screamed to act, but he knew one wrong move would put her in greater danger. The air in the crypt was thick with tension, and for a moment, time seemed to slow. The man's eyes were cold, unwavering. "You think you can just walk away with that book?" the man asked, his voice calm, yet dripping with menace. "You think you can uncover the secrets buried here and get away with it?" Grant stood his ground, his voice steady despite the fear gnawing at him. "We came here for the truth, and we're not leaving without it." The man's lips curled into a twisted smile. "The truth," he scoffed. "There are things that are better left buried. You don't understand what you're dealing with." He jerked his head toward the crypt's walls, as if the very stones held the answers to the darkness that had been hidden away. Sister Catherine, her face pale with fear but her resolve unbroken, turned her head slightly to glance at Grant. "The man's right," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Some secrets, they're too dangerous. I've spent my life protecting them, but you don't know what you're unlocking. It's a force beyond comprehension." Grant's mind raced. What could she mean? What had they uncovered that was so powerful, so dangerous? Was the book really a key to something beyond their understanding? He took a deep breath, the weight of the moment pressing down on him. He wasn't going to let this man control the narrative anymore. "I don't care about the danger," Grant said firmly, his voice louder now. "If the truth is worth hiding, then it's worth fighting for." The man's grip tightened on Sister Catherine's arm, but his expression faltered for a split second, a hint of uncertainty crossing his face. Grant saw the opportunity and seized it. He lunged forward, throwing his body into the man, knocking him off balance. The knife flew from his hand, skittering across the stone floor, and Grant quickly grabbed it. The man staggered back, but he didn't seem to lose his composure. "You think you've won?" he growled, his eyes flashing with anger. "You don't understand what you've just unleashed." Grant didn't respond. He was too focused on Sister Catherine, who was now gasping for breath, her arms still in the man's grip. Grant turned toward her, reaching out to help her to her feet. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice soft with concern. Sister Catherine nodded slowly, though her eyes were filled with fear. "We're not safe," she whispered. "The book, it's already started to affect us. If we don't stop now, it will consume us all." Grant's heart sank as her words echoed in his mind. He didn't know what it meant, but he felt the weight of her warning. The book wasn't just a treasure. It was a force, a power that had been hidden for a reason. The man who had attacked them was right about one thing. The truth they sought came with a price. Grant stepped back, glancing at Scout, who was still standing by the door, his eyes alert. He needed to think fast. They couldn't stay here much longer. The man might recover, and they weren't prepared to fight him again. "We need to get out of here," Grant said, pulling Sister Catherine toward the back of the crypt. "Now." Sister Catherine hesitated but then nodded, her fear palpable. "I know a way out," she said, leading them through a narrow passage at the far end of the crypt. The walls seemed to close in around them as they moved quickly through the dark corridor, the air growing colder with each step. They reached a wooden door, ancient and worn, but still sturdy. Sister Catherine pushed it open, revealing a small chamber on the other side. The light from their flashlights flickered as they stepped inside. There was no one here. No signs of life. "What is this place?" Grant asked, his voice low. Sister Catherine took a deep breath, her hand trembling as she gestured toward the far wall. "This is where they kept it hidden," she said. "This is where the book belongs." Grant's eyes followed her gaze, and there, set into the stone wall, was an alcove. Inside it, nestled on a stone pedestal, was a small, ornate chest. The chest was intricately carved with symbols Grant didn't recognize, its wood darkened by age but still pristine. The air around it felt heavier, as though the chest itself was alive, pulsing with an unseen force. Grant moved toward it, his hand reaching out slowly. "What's inside?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Sister Catherine stepped forward, her expression somber. "The book," she said. "It's where it all started, where the truth began." Grant opened the chest, and as he lifted the lid, a soft, almost imperceptible hum filled the air. Inside the chest, resting on a velvet cushion, was the book they had discovered earlier. The same worn leather cover, the same faded title. The room seemed to shift as the light from their flashlights danced across the pages. And for a moment, Grant felt the pull of the book, the weight of its history, and the power it contained. The man's warning echoed in his mind. "You don't understand what you've unleashed." He was right, but there was no turning back now. The truth was within their grasp, and nothing was going to stop them from uncovering it. As Grant lifted the lid of the chest, the room seemed to breathe with him. A soft, almost imperceptible hum filled the air, vibrating through the stone walls of the crypt. He looked down at the book, resting on a cushion of velvet, its leather cover worn from years of age but still strong, as if the secrets it held had not been touched in centuries. The title was barely legible, the ink faded with time, but there was no mistaking its importance. Grant's fingers trembled as he reached for it, the weight of history pressing down on him with each second. Behind him, Sister Catherine stood silently, her face pale, her eyes wide with a mix of fear and anticipation. She had seen this book before, had known its power, but now, seeing it in front of her again, the weight of it was almost too much to bear. Grant opened the book slowly, careful not to damage the fragile pages. As the first page turned, he felt a cold draft sweep through the room, and a faint whisper seemed to rise from the depths of the crypt. He paused, looking around, but the room was empty, save for him and Sister Catherine. Yet, he couldn't shake the feeling that something, or someone, was watching them. The pages were filled with strange symbols, diagrams, and annotations, all written in a language that seemed both ancient and familiar. There were drawings of the church, its foundations, and intricate maps of tunnels and chambers hidden beneath it. But it was the final pages that made Grant's heart skip a beat. They were filled with a warning, scrawled in bold, frantic handwriting. The book is the key to unlocking the power, but it will consume those who seek it. Leave it. Forget it. Do not open what lies beneath. The words seemed to pulse in the dim light of the crypt, their meaning hanging heavy in the air. Grant felt a cold shiver run down his spine as he read them. He turned to Sister Catherine, his voice hoarse. What does this mean? What power is it talking about? Sister Catherine's face had gone ashen, and she took a step back, her eyes darting nervously around the room. It means we are too late, she whispered. The power in this book isn't just knowledge, it's something far worse. The people who tried to uncover it before, they were never the same. They were consumed by it, driven to madness. This is why it was hidden. Grant stood frozen, the book still in his hands, its weight pressing down on him with an unbearable intensity. His mind raced with the implications of what he was holding. Could the truth in these pages really be so dangerous? Was uncovering it worth the cost? Sister Catherine's voice broke through his thoughts, urgent and trembling. We have to leave. Now, she said, her gaze flicking toward the door of the crypt. Grant turned, seeing the panic in her eyes. He had no idea what was coming, but he felt the danger closing in around them. As they made their way toward the exit, the whispers in the room seemed to grow louder, the very walls of the crypt seeming to pulse with an ancient energy. The air grew thick, heavy with an unnatural pressure, and Grant felt the hairs on the back of his neck stand on end. The crypt was no longer just a place of history. It had become something else, something alive. When they reached the wooden door at the back of the chamber, Grant paused. There, on the ground in front of them, was the faint outline of a figure, someone standing still in the shadows, blocking their path. We cannot leave, the figure said, its voice low and echoing through the crypt. Grant felt his heart race, his breath quicken. The figure stepped forward into the light, and Grant's stomach churned at the sight. It was the man who had attacked them earlier, the one who had tried to stop them from uncovering the secrets of the church. But now, something was different. His eyes were hollow, his face gaunt, and his movements were slow, deliberate. It was as though he was no longer fully human. You should have left, the man said, his voice carrying an eerie calmness. You don't understand the consequences of your actions. Grant stepped back, his body tense, his hand still clutching the book. What happened to you? He asked, his voice barely a whisper. The man's lips twisted into a grim smile. This, he said, motioning toward the book, is what happens when you open the door to the truth. It consumes you. It makes you see things you weren't meant to see. Sister Catherine stepped forward, her face filled with dread. No, she whispered. Not like this. The man's eyes locked onto her, and for a moment, Grant saw a flicker of recognition. You should have stopped them, the man said, his voice soft but filled with accusation. But now, you're just as lost as I am. With that, he reached into the folds of his coat and pulled out a small vial, holding it up to the light. Inside, a dark liquid swirled, catching the dim glow of their flashlights. This is the only way to escape it, the man said, his tone growing desperate. You can't fight it. You can't run from it. But you can numb it. Sister Catherine gasped. No, she said again, her voice trembling with fear. That's what they used. That's what they did to you. The man nodded slowly, his eyes hollow. It's the only way to survive. The book doesn't just give you knowledge. It gives you visions, visions that take you over. The only way to stay sane is to numb yourself, to forget what you saw. Grant stood frozen, the book heavy in his hands. He had come here seeking the truth, but now he wasn't sure he wanted to know anymore. He looked at Sister Catherine, and in that moment, he understood. The truth they sought was no gift, it was a curse. Grant's hands trembled as he held the book, the weight of its secrets pressing down on him like an invisible force. He could feel the man's hollow eyes on him, and the eerie stillness of the crypt seemed to stretch for eternity. The vial in the man's hand glowed faintly in the low light, its contents swirling darkly, like a poison ready to be consumed. Grant had to make a decision, and he had to make it fast. You're wrong, Grant said, his voice steady but firm. I won't let this destroy me. I won't numb myself just to survive. The man's hollow smile only widened. You think you have a choice? You already opened it. You can't close the door once it's opened. He stepped forward, the vial still dangling from his fingers, his every movement slow and deliberate. The truth is powerful, but it comes at a cost. he continued, his voice like a whisper. And the cost is everything. Grant took a step back, his heart pounding in his chest. He could hear the distant sound of footsteps, the faintest echo coming from the stone corridor beyond the crypt. Someone else was coming, and time was running out. He glanced at Sister Catherine, her eyes filled with the same dread that had been growing inside him ever since they found the book. He had come here seeking answers, but now he was beginning to wish he had never set foot in this cursed place. "We need to leave," Grant said urgently, his voice growing more desperate. "We need to get out of here now." Sister Catherine nodded quickly, her face pale with fear. But just as they turned toward the door, the man's voice stopped them. "It's already too late," he said softly, almost as if to himself. "Once you've seen the truth, it changes you. You can't run from what you've unlocked." Grant's eyes widened as he turned back toward the man. "What do you mean?" he asked, his voice hoarse. "What's going to happen to us?" The man's face grew even darker, his expression becoming something more sinister. "The truth doesn't just open your eyes," he said. "It opens everything. And once everything is open, you can't close it again. The truth will consume you, just as it consumed me." Grant's mind raced as he tried to process the man's words. He could feel the power of the book growing stronger, its influence pulling at him, and the air around them felt charged, alive with a force he couldn't understand. Sister Catherine stepped forward, her hands trembling as she reached out to Grant. "We can't let him control us," she said, her voice breaking. "We have to stop him before he makes us forget who we are." But as she spoke, the man's eyes flashed with a cold, terrible intensity. "You're too late," he said. "The truth is already inside you. There's no turning back now." The air in the crypt grew heavier, colder, as though the very walls were closing in. Grant could feel the room constricting around them, and for the first time, he understood the weight of what they had uncovered. This wasn't just a secret. It was a force, a power that had been hidden away for centuries, and now it was unleashed. The man's voice echoed in the room, growing louder, more urgent. "You'll feel it soon," he warned. "The truth is like a fire. It will burn through you, change everything you thought you knew, until you're no longer the person you were before. And once it's done with you, there will be nothing left." Grant's heart raced as the realization hit him. He had opened the door to something far greater than he had ever imagined, and now it was too late to turn back. But there was still one choice left. He could fight. He could fight the man, fight the truth, fight whatever darkness was trying to consume them. He looked at Sister Catherine, her face filled with terror, but also with a quiet determination. "We can do this," he said, his voice firm. "We don't have to let it destroy us. We can fight back." The man's laugh was low, cold, and filled with malice. "You think you can fight the truth?" he said. "You think you can fight what's already inside you? There's no fighting it. It will break you." Grant gritted his teeth, his grip on the book tightening. The man was wrong. He didn't care about the consequences anymore. He didn't care about the danger. He had come this far, and he wasn't going to back down now. "We'll see about that," Grant said, his voice low and determined. As the man stepped forward, raising the vial in his hand, a sudden movement caught Grant's eye. In the shadows, Scout was moving toward the door, his nose low to the ground, his body tense and alert. Grant's heart skipped a beat. The dog had always been more than just a companion. He had a gift, an instinct for danger. And now, it seemed, that gift was about to save them. Before the man could react, Scout leapt, his body crashing into the man's legs, knocking him off balance. The vial flew from his hand, shattering against the stone floor. The man let out a roar of anger, but it was too late. Grant and Sister Catherine wasted no time. They ran toward the door, their feet pounding against the cold stone. The sound of footsteps echoed behind them, but they didn't look back. They couldn't afford to. The truth was still out there, still waiting to be uncovered, but for now, they had to survive. The crypt was no longer a place of refuge. It was a battleground, and they had just taken their first step toward escaping it. Grant and Sister Catherine didn't stop running until they were outside the church, gasping for breath in the cold night air. The storm had passed, leaving behind a quiet calm that seemed unnatural, as if the world itself was holding its breath. The church loomed behind them, its dark silhouette standing against the dim light of the moon. Grant's mind was racing, trying to process everything that had just happened. They had come so close to uncovering the truth, but now they were fleeing from it, as if the very knowledge they sought had turned into a curse. Sister Catherine, her face pale and drawn, glanced back at the church. "It's not over," she whispered, her voice thick with fear. "It will never be over." Grant turned to her, his breath shallow. "What do you mean?" "The truth," she said, her eyes wide. "The truth is still inside us. The book, the power, it doesn't let go. It changes you. And once it's inside you, there's no escaping it." Grant felt a chill run down his spine. He had suspected something was off, but hearing her say it out loud made it all the more real. They had unleashed something much bigger than themselves. Something that had been buried for centuries. "What do we do now?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. Sister Catherine didn't answer right away. She stared at the church, her gaze distant, as if she was seeing something beyond the present. Finally, she spoke, her voice filled with sorrow. "We have to stop it. We have to destroy the book before it destroys us." Grant felt a surge of anger, frustration, and fear. He had come to this place seeking answers. But now, all he felt was regret. "How do we destroy something like that?" he asked, his voice hoarse. "We can't even begin to understand what it really is." Sister Catherine shook her head. "That's what makes it so dangerous. The book doesn't just give knowledge, it gives power. And the more you seek, the more it takes. The more you try to control it, the more it controls you." Grant clenched his fists, the weight of her words sinking in. He had thought they were just looking for the truth, but now he realized that the truth was a double-edged sword. It could give answers, but it could also consume everything in its path. "But we can't just walk away from it," he said, determination building in his voice. "We have to finish what we started." Sister Catherine looked at him, her expression somber. "And what if finishing it means destroying everything we've worked for? What if it means destroying ourselves?" Grant didn't answer. Instead, he turned away from her and started walking toward the church. Sister Catherine's voice called out to him, but he didn't stop. He had come this far. He wasn't going to let fear stop him now. As he walked back into the church, the air felt different, thicker, heavier. The weight of the book's power seemed to press down on him with every step. It was as if the walls of the church itself were alive, watching him, waiting for him to make a choice. The door to the crypt was still open, the dark passage leading back to where it all began. Grant stepped inside, his flashlight cutting through the darkness, casting long shadows across the stone walls. Sister Catherine was right behind him, her footsteps soft but determined. The silence in the crypt was suffocating. There was no sound but their breathing and the faint hum of the power that seemed to pulse through the air. They reached the small chamber where the book had been, and Grant's eyes were drawn immediately to the pedestal where it had been placed. But it was empty. The chest was gone. "No," Sister Catherine whispered, her voice trembling. "It's taken it. It's already moved." Grant felt his pulse quicken. The book was no longer just a thing. It was a presence, a force that was constantly shifting, always one step ahead. The crypt felt alive, as if it was holding its breath, waiting for something. And then, in the distance, Grant heard it, a faint scraping sound, like metal on stone. His heart skipped a beat. Someone was in the crypt with them. Before he could react, a shadow moved in the corner of his vision. The figure emerged slowly from the darkness, a tall man with hollow eyes and a twisted smile. Grant's blood ran cold as he recognized him, the man who had attacked them before. But now, something was different. The man's face was pale, his eyes dark and glassy, as though he were no longer fully human. "You shouldn't have come back," the man said, his voice low and distorted. "You can't stop it. You can't stop what's already inside you." Grant stepped back, his hand reaching for the knife he had taken from the man earlier. "What do you want?" he demanded. "What are you trying to do?" The man laughed softly, a sound that sent a chill down Grant's spine. "I'm not trying to do anything. I'm already part of it. I already understand it. And soon, you will too." Grant's mind raced, but before he could make a move, the man lunged at him. Grant barely had time to react, but Scout, who had been silently watching, sprang forward, knocking the man to the ground with a powerful force. The man screamed as he hit the floor, but Grant didn't stop. He raised the knife, ready to end this once and for all. But before he could strike, the room seemed to shift. The crypt vibrated, the walls pulsing with an unnatural energy. The book, the force that had been controlling everything, was in the air, surrounding them. Grant felt it tightening around him, pushing him down, making it harder to breathe. He had no choice but to face it head-on. With a final look at Sister Catherine, he plunged the knife into the man's chest, cutting off the influence that had consumed him. The man's body went limp, and the room fell silent again. But it wasn't over. The truth, the book, was still out there. And Grant knew they hadn't won. Not yet. The crypt fell silent once more after Grant plunged the knife into the man's chest, the vibration of the ancient walls slowly fading as the energy in the room dissipated. The man, who had once been a part of the church's dark past, now lay lifeless on the cold stone floor. Grant stood over him, the knife still in his hand, his chest heaving with the exertion of the fight. His heart pounded in his ears, but the overwhelming sense of dread still loomed heavy in the air. The room was no longer just a place of history. It had become a battleground, a place where the forces of truth and darkness had clashed, and the truth was still out there, lingering in the shadows. He glanced at Sister Catherine, who was kneeling beside the fallen man. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with shock, but there was a strange relief in her gaze. She looked up at him, her voice barely a whisper. "It's done, but it's not over, is it?" Grant shook his head slowly, his mind racing. He couldn't shake the feeling that the worst was yet to come. The book, the ancient knowledge they had uncovered, was still in the air, its influence still pulsing, and they hadn't won. Not yet. "We need to leave," Grant said, his voice low, steady, but filled with urgency. Sister Catherine stood up, brushing the dust from her knees. "Where will we go?" she asked, her voice trembling. Grant didn't have an answer. They had nowhere to run. They couldn't outrun the truth, and they couldn't hide from the forces they had unleashed. But they had to keep moving. They had no choice. Grant turned toward the altar, where the book had once been, the place where it all began. But the pedestal was empty. The book was gone. It wasn't just the man who had taken it. It was the very essence of the truth itself, slipping away like a shadow into the unknown. The air felt thick, as if something was watching them, waiting for the next move. They couldn't leave. Not yet. Not without the book. Grant turned to Sister Catherine, who was looking around the crypt as if searching for answers. "The book is gone, but the knowledge, it's still here," she said, her voice soft but determined. "We can't let it disappear." Grant nodded, his mind made up. They couldn't walk away, not when they were so close to the truth. The answers were still out there, hidden within the walls of the church, and they couldn't let the darkness claim it. The two of them began searching the crypt, moving quickly and silently as they scanned every inch of the room. They checked the walls, the shelves, and the corners, but there was nothing. No sign of the book, no sign of where it had gone. The crypt seemed to mock them, the silence pressing in around them like a suffocating blanket. And then, as if in response to their search, the walls shifted. The ground beneath them trembled, and a low rumbling sound filled the air. The stone walls groaned, the ancient building seeming to come alive. Grant looked at Sister Catherine, his breath catching in his throat. "What is this?" he asked. Sister Catherine's face had gone white. "The crypt is a living thing," she said. "It's been here for centuries, guarding what was buried beneath it. The book, it was just the beginning." As she spoke, the rumbling grew louder, the entire crypt shaking with the force of an unseen power. The stone slabs that lined the floor began to shift, revealing a passageway below. Grant and Sister Catherine exchanged a look of understanding. The book was gone, but the secrets it had guarded still remained. They couldn't leave now. They had to know what lay beneath the crypt, what truths had been hidden away for so long. They stepped forward, descending the staircase that had appeared, their flashlights cutting through the darkness. The air was thick with dust, and the smell of age and earth filled their lungs. As they reached the bottom, they found themselves standing in a cavernous chamber, the walls lined with ancient artifacts, scrolls, and relics. But it wasn't the artifacts that caught Grant's attention. It was the enormous stone structure in the center of the room. It was shaped like an altar, but it was covered in strange symbols and carvings. As they approached it, the temperature dropped, and the air grew heavier. Grant could feel the weight of the room pressing down on him, and he knew they had reached the heart of the mystery. The truth was here, hidden in the shadows. The book might have been taken, but the knowledge, the power, it was still buried deep within these walls. Grant and Sister Catherine stepped closer, their eyes drawn to the intricate carvings on the altar. It was a map, a blueprint of the church and the surrounding area, but there were markings on it that none of them had seen before. "This is it," Sister Catherine whispered, her voice trembling. "This is where it all began. The book was only a part of the puzzle. The real truth, it's here, in this room." Grant stepped forward, his hand reaching out to touch the carvings. As soon as his fingers made contact, the stones seemed to hum with energy. The air around them shifted, and a faint light began to glow from the altar. The room seemed to come alive, and for a moment, Grant could feel the weight of the truth pressing down on him, the power of what had been hidden for so long. He looked at Sister Catherine, his eyes wide with realization. They had found it, the truth, and now they were faced with a choice. The secrets they had uncovered were no longer just a matter of knowledge. They were a force, a power that could change everything. But at what cost? The light from the altar grew brighter, pulsing in rhythm with Grant's racing heartbeat. The room seemed to stretch and twist, the walls closing in around them. The power from the stone altar was undeniable, its force radiating through the air like a living entity. Grant could feel the weight of centuries bearing down on him, the truth they had uncovered now clawing at their minds, pulling them deeper into the mystery. Sister Catherine stood beside him, her hand trembling as she reached for the carvings on the altar, her eyes wide with realization. "This is it," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the hum of the room. "The source of everything, the knowledge we were never meant to find." Grant looked at her, his heart sinking as he understood the depth of her words. The book, the church, the crypt, everything had been leading them here, to this moment. But at what cost? The truth they had been searching for was now within their grasp, and yet, it felt like a curse, not a blessing. "We have to destroy it," Grant said, his voice shaking with fear. "We can't let this power get out. We can't let it consume us." Sister Catherine turned to him, her eyes filled with a quiet sorrow. "We can't destroy it," she said softly. "It's too late for that. The knowledge is already inside us. The truth is already taking root." Grant's mind raced as he tried to process her words. What did she mean? How could they stop something that had already begun to take hold? But as he reached out to touch the altar once more, the light flared, blinding him for a moment. When his vision cleared, he saw it. An opening in the floor, a darkened hole leading deep into the earth. The altar was no longer just an object. It was a gateway, a portal to something far darker than they had ever imagined. The air around them crackled with energy, the ground trembling beneath their feet. Grant's pulse quickened as he realized the truth. The altar was not just a source of power. It was a doorway to a realm of darkness, a place where the knowledge they sought could unravel reality itself. "It's not just the book," Sister Catherine whispered, her voice filled with awe. "It's the very foundation of the church. The altar, the crypt, it's all connected. We've opened the door, and now we must face what lies beyond." Grant could feel it then, the pull, the force trying to draw him into the abyss. He fought against it, his body shaking, but the power was too strong. The truth, the knowledge, it was all around him, suffocating him, drowning him in its weight. "We have to close it," Grant said, his voice strained. "We can't let it reach the world." Sister Catherine stepped forward, her hands trembling as she reached for the opening in the floor. "We can't close it," she said. "Once the door is opened, there's no going back. We're too far in. But we can control it. We can keep it from spreading." Grant stared at her, disbelief flooding his mind. "Control it? How? How do we control something like this?" Sister Catherine's eyes met his, and for the first time, he saw a glimmer of hope in her gaze. "We stop it from taking over us," she said softly. "We control the truth by not letting it control us." Grant didn't know if he believed her. The force from the altar was overwhelming, and every instinct inside him screamed to run. But he couldn't run anymore. They had come this far, and they had to face what was ahead. Slowly, he reached for the edge of the opening in the floor, his hand shaking as he placed it on the stone. The moment his fingers made contact, the ground shook again, and a low growl echoed through the room. The darkness was closing in, threatening to swallow everything whole. The pull was almost unbearable, but Grant held on, pushing against it with every ounce of strength he had. Sister Catherine moved beside him, her eyes focused on the altar, her hands still trembling. "We can do this," she said quietly. "We have to believe we can." Grant nodded, though his thoughts were clouded with doubt. But in that moment, With the power from the altar pressing down on him, he understood something. The truth they had sought was not meant to be uncovered. It wasn't meant to be known. And yet, they had found it. They had opened the door. And now, they had to live with the consequences. The world outside still lay beyond the crypt, but in this moment, it felt as though they were suspended in time, caught between two realities, the world they knew and the dark force they had unleashed. There was no turning back now. They had opened the door, and whatever came next, they would have to face together. The ground beneath them rumbled again, shaking the very foundation of the church. The altar glowed with a sinister light, pulsating in time with the growing tremors, as if responding to their presence. Grant gritted his teeth and held onto the edge of the stone opening, the weight of the dark energy pressing down on him like an invisible force. Sister Catherine stood beside him, her hand gripping his arm with a mixture of desperation and resolve. They were both fighting against something far greater than they had anticipated. The truth they had uncovered was no longer just an abstract concept. It was alive, and it was trying to consume them. "We need to stop it," Grant said, his voice filled with determination. His breath came in shallow gasps, each one more labored than the last as the pressure in the room seemed to increase. The altar's glow intensified, casting eerie shadows against the walls. Sister Catherine looked at him, her face drawn and pale. "How?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. She was terrified, but not for herself. She was terrified for what was happening to them, for what they had unleashed. "We have to close the portal," Grant said, though doubt crept into his mind as the words left his lips. He had no idea how they could close it, no idea what kind of power they were dealing with. But they had no choice. The longer they stood there, the stronger the pull of the darkness became. He could feel the room suffocating them, and it was only a matter of time before the truth overwhelmed them. The book, the altar, the crypt, it was all connected, and the energy was feeding on their fear, their uncertainty. Sister Catherine stepped forward, her face hardening as she met Grant's gaze. "We have to destroy the source," she said, her voice filled with a strange, quiet certainty. "The altar. It's the anchor. If we destroy the altar, the power will dissipate." Grant hesitated for a moment. The idea of destroying the very thing that had been the heart of the church for centuries unsettling him. But Sister Catherine was right. They had no other choice. "How do we destroy it?" Grant asked. "We need to destroy the connection to the book," she replied. "The altar is the conduit. It channels the energy. Without it, the book loses its power." She reached into her bag and pulled out a small, ornate knife, its blade gleaming under the altar's light. This was passed down from the original priests. "It's meant to sever the connection. If we use it on the altar, it should break the flow of energy." Grant stared at the knife, the weight of the decision bearing down on him. He had seen the man before, the one who had tried to stop them. He had been consumed by the truth. What if they were making the same mistake? What if destroying the altar only opened the door wider, releasing something far worse? But Sister Catherine's eyes were filled with certainty, and he knew she wasn't going to back down. Neither of them could. He nodded, the resolve settling in his chest. They had come this far. There was no turning back. Together, they approached the altar, each step feeling like it took them deeper into the heart of the darkness. The closer they got, the stronger the pull became. The room felt alive, its energy crackling in the air. Grant could almost hear whispers in the back of his mind, urging him to turn back, to leave the truth alone. But he couldn't. Not now. Not when they were so close. Sister Catherine raised the knife, holding it above the altar, her eyes focused and steady. "We can do this," she said, her voice filled with determination. Grant nodded, his heart pounding in his chest. "On three," he said, his voice barely a whisper. 1, 2. The moment the knife plunged into the stone, the ground shook violently, and the light from the altar flared, blinding them both. For a brief second, the entire room seemed to collapse into nothingness, the air thick with an unbearable pressure. Then, everything went still. The light from the altar flickered and died, leaving the room in complete darkness. The crypt was silent now, the energy that had filled the space fading away as if it had never existed. Grant stood there, his breath coming in heavy gasps, his hand still gripping the hilt of the knife. He looked at Sister Catherine, her face illuminated by the faint light of their flashlights. Her eyes were wide, but there was no fear in them now. "Is it over?" Grant asked, his voice hoarse. Sister Catherine slowly lowered the knife, her expression unreadable. "I think so," she whispered. "We've severed the connection. The altar is destroyed. The book can't reach us now." Grant let out a long breath, the weight of the moment sinking in. They had done it. They had stopped the darkness from consuming them. But as the silence settled around them, a nagging feeling tugged at his mind. They had destroyed the altar, but the truth they had uncovered, it was still inside them. The book was gone, the power was gone, but the knowledge, what they knew, would never leave them. The truth was not something that could be erased. And somewhere in the back of Grant's mind, he knew that this wasn't truly over. The truth would always find a way to resurface. The silence in the crypt stretched out, oppressive and thick. Grant's hands were still shaking, the knife now lying in his grip like a forgotten tool, its purpose fulfilled. The altar that had once pulsed with dark energy was now a cold, lifeless structure, the stone cracked and broken where the blade had struck. Yet, as they stood there in the aftermath, Grant could feel the weight of the truth pressing down on him. The power of the book, the truth they had uncovered, still lingered in the air like a silent specter, impossible to escape. Sister Catherine's breathing was shallow, but there was a certain peace about her now. She looked at Grant, her face pale but determined. "We did it," she said softly. Her voice echoed faintly in the empty crypt. "We stopped it." Grant nodded, but there was no triumph in his expression. "Did we?" he asked, his voice filled with uncertainty. "Did we really stop it, or have we just opened another door?" Sister Catherine looked at him, her eyes searching. "I don't know," she admitted. "The truth we uncovered, it's not something that can be erased. But at least we took control of it. We've stopped it from spreading, from consuming anyone else." Grant's gaze drifted back to the broken altar, the faint glow from the crypt's remaining light illuminating the cracks in the stone. The truth was still inside them, inside him. He could feel it, like a weight in his chest, a pressure that would never go away. They had destroyed the altar, but the knowledge it had unleashed could never be unseen. The truth was a part of them now, and there was no going back. "The world may never know what happened here," Grant said, his voice grim. "But we will, and we'll carry it with us for the rest of our lives." Sister Catherine placed a hand on his shoulder, her touch gentle but firm. "We have to live with it, yes," she said. "But we also have to remember that we made the choice to stop it. We could have let it consume us, let it control us, but we didn't, and that has to count for something." Grant looked at her, seeing the strength in her eyes. She was right. They had fought against something far darker than either of them had ever imagined, and they had come out the other side. But the weight of the truth still lingered, heavy and unyielding. They turned to leave the crypt, their footsteps echoing through the empty chamber, the silence pressing in around them. The night air outside was cold and still, the storm having passed. The world felt strangely quiet, as if everything had been held in suspension, waiting for them to make their move. But as Grant stepped into the night, he felt a strange sense of finality. The battle was over, but the war, against the truth, against the power they had uncovered, would never truly end. "What now?" Sister Catherine asked, her voice quiet as they walked away from the church. Grant looked at her, his face set in determination. "Now we move on," he said. "We find a way to live with what we know, and we make sure it never happens again." They walked in silence for a few moments, the weight of the past lingering between them. But as they reached the edge of the town, something in the air shifted. The truth, the knowledge, was still there, but it wasn't consuming them anymore. It was just a part of who they were now, and somehow that was enough. The road ahead wasn't clear, but they would face it together, whatever it held. They had stopped the darkness, for now. And that, at least, was something they could hold on to. As they walked away from the church, Grant felt the first stirrings of hope in his chest. The truth would always be with them, but they were stronger than it. And with that, they stepped into the future, ready to face whatever came next, knowing that they had faced the darkness and survived.